Bliss and Grit is an entirely listener-supported show. Supporting us is also designed to support you through keeping the episodes rolling, but also through rewards for your donation, like a Getting Started guide, a private forum, and downloadable meditations. To become a supporting member, you can visit patreon.com/bliss and grit. Hello, beautifuls. You are listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto, as well as our special guest today, Jeannie Zandi. On the show, we're talking about being on the awakening path, and what does that actually mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything? All the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life. So as I mentioned, in this episode, we're speaking with our very special guest and dear friend, Jeannie Zandi. Jeannie has been on our show before, and today she's offering some profound must-hear insight on yin and yang that we're very excited to share with you. Our conversation touches upon so much, including what true power looks like, the imbalances our culture has perpetuated, what healing would look like through the lens of yin, and how we can move forward together in dismantling the conditioning that has led to so much pain. For anyone exploring healing on both a personal and collective level, this episode is for you. She put words to a revolution that we're just now realizing we've all already been a part of. Jeannie is truly such a force of love. She's the director of Living as Love, a nonprofit organization dedicated to seeding a culture of the heart on the planet, inspiring, teaching, and supporting people to live their essence as love. A year before the birth of her daughter, Jeannie plunged into a dark night of the soul that culminated in a radical shift of consciousness. She's known for her fearless clarity, tender mercy towards humanness, and a juicy, poetic, and often humorous style that draws from Advaita Vedanta, Sufism, Christian mysticism, and the ongoing revelation of fully engaged living. Residing in Colorado, she travels widely in the U.S., bringing a down-to-earth embodied teaching of living as love. For more info on Jeannie and the upcoming course she speaks about, which is a 3-call course, so it can be done long distance, you can go to jeanniezandi.com or, of course, check out the show notes for this episode. If you're enjoying the show, we would be thrilled if you left a review, if you went to blissandgrit.com to subscribe to get our weekly digest, or became a supporting member at patreon.com/blissandgrit. And we also both work with clients privately as they navigate this path, which can be a pretty subtle dance. When we try and do it on our own, it can be downright confusing. So sessions with us can be another way to support our work and at the same time get some support for yourself. Okay, last thing before we head into the conversation, Vanessa and I swear sometimes, so headphones if you're in company that you do not want hearing that. Okay, here we go. So thank you so much, Jeannie, for joining Vanessa and I today.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay! Reunited.
It's so good to have you on the show again. And
Yeah.
we were just saying right before we hit record, I cannot think of any other person on planet Earth I would want to talk to more today than you, Jeannie, and any other conversation I would want to have than this one. So I'm delighted that the divine has brought us this opportunity. And what we want to talk about and what you talk about so expertly is the divine feminine and the power and the magnificence of yin and of the feminine. And so we can start broadly, and then of course we'll go from there, but just want to talk about it's so up right now in the culture. So maybe we can start with, what does divine feminine mean to you, or powerful yin mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I can't talk about yin without talking about yang at the same time because they're like this. And what I will say is that they're a lot of my connection to the holy, a lot of my experience, rather than an up, is a down. And I like to say, no matter which direction you go long enough, you'll run into the holy. So, and, we all know from non-dual teachings and some who are watching from our experience about this sense of the ground of being, silence. Some would call it the void or darkness. Shh, it's just shh. And out of that rises all of manifestation. And in the organic movement, I have to talk with my hands. I think it's the Italian side of my blood. As when we look at the sort of organic round that happens within manifestation, so the quiet ground, the seed resting, the sprouting, the flowering, the growth, the fruiting, the rotting down to the ground again to silence. This is how things happen on earth. This is how things happen in manifestation. They happen in these cycles of silence. There's something in our psyches as we unfold into new capacities. There's a birthing, there's a wobbly, there's a strengthening, there's a flowering, there's a fruiting. And then we can see, watching my child grow and mature. I could watch her, the cycles as she entered a new developmental stage. She would get cranky and a little insecure and want a little bit more mommy as she was moving into the rotting and then the birthing on wobbly legs again. So this is an important backdrop to understand yin and yang, which are the divine movements of life energy as the gift of life energy moves into manifestation. That's the way it moves. And throughout time, there have been cultures who have worshiped the whole round. We, however, are very into watch the needle stuck on fruiting. Mm-hmm. Athena springing from Zeus's head, fully armored. An adult. This is how Athena is born. She's not born from a woman. She doesn't have any babyhood or messiness, or she springs fully armored from Zeus's head. And when you live in a yang-dominated culture like we do, that's glorified. Sort of like I was commenting to my sweetie who likes to watch football last night. Isn't it interesting how we glorify male athletes? And there's nothing wrong with male athletes. They're glorious. And to watch someone do a fast break in all of his 28-year-old manhood is just like a glory to behold. But to worship just this and not this means that old, wise people are just in a closet. And anything that wobbles, anything that opens, is soft, is not quite it, is not quite man enough, so to speak. And we all suffer from this. So I don't want to make it sound at all like this is a glorious picnic for men. Because the yin in us cannot be stamped out. And the emphasis on you should be on top of it. You should be in your full fruiting. Any sign that you're on wobbly legs or any sign that you're rotting is a sign that you're not with the program. And all we have to do in our spiritual practice is run into a little bit of deconstruction and turn into a blathering mess to feel the weight of how the culture views this and this. It's like, okay, we like you when you're flowering and fruiting. It sort of soothes us if we can look at the people around us and see that they're there. But it completely unnerves us when anyone is down here. Now, the yang movement is the rising movement. It's the movement of, I've got something. Here it is. I'm spilling it into manifestation. The yin movement is softening, opening, sinking, openness, softness. And The other day, on an open circle call, I was dialoguing with a woman who was very tweaked, as many women are, by the national stage right now and the Me Too movement and all of that. And one of the things I said to her, I would like to say to all women, is that it is not your softness, it is not your vulnerability that got you hurt. It was the pathology in the other being. And part of the beauty of yin, and my daughter just embodied this so much as a child. I protected her pretty fiercely, not only from obvious harm, but also just I protected her capacity to rest in the unknown, to be soft, to be open, and to not be poked, to not be tickled, to not be laughed at, but to let the splendor of her soft openness just fill the room. And she was a pretty inward child. And so the gift of the times that she would just unfold energetically that way and say something really wise. Like once we were sitting at the kitchen table and all of a sudden she gets this look on her face, completely soft and open. And we were talking about crying and she said, "Mama, I feel the most love when I'm crying. Tears are like God's rain on the earth." And it wasn't just the words, it was like the hush of that beautiful feminine. And I think in a culture that glorifies yang, we glorify a certain strength that is cut off from its yin roots. So when a being embodies the capacity to soften, to sink, to rot, to wobble, and reclaims all of that, sort of dusts the humiliation off of all of that, because most of us, when we go into that, when we get near that in our lives, humiliation comes up. People start urging us out of there. And so there are a whole bunch of human qualities that have sort of a big red X marked on the door to them. And so for me, the divine feminine, there's definitely like a beauty to the rise, but there's such a beauty to the fall, to the soften, to the open, to the sinking. So in my case, I experienced awakening and I experienced embodiment as a process of softening open, like the pupil of an eye or like a flower. And that happens naturally and cannot happen with the meddling that we like to do from our false yang. Make it happen, hurry it up. Let's take that flower bud and pull it open rather than behold, allow, and watch in the darkness the pupil or the flower bloom open. So there's such a beautiful, almost like a hush-filled space within which, and this is deeply how I work with people, both women and men, because I protect, I would call it a womb space. I protect the space for that beingness, for the embodiment and the body and the conditioning to pause, open, and for the being to have a space to sink and sink and sink and sink. And people just fall open in that. It's very beautiful. And the beauty of, I usually use the word yin because these energies are alive and well in both men and women. And people can often, if we say divine feminine, we start to picture, goddess women dancing in a circle. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Sure.
But that doesn't really resonate with the dudes so much.
Yes.
And a huge part, I work with men also. And a big part of men's healing has to do with reclaiming the softening inside of them. When men's bodies are so rigid that they cannot feel their hearts, that this model of strength that we have that's cut off at the root of yin and is instead an overcompensated rigidity, it results in what we have now. And men rarely have safe space to soften. even in their own bodies. I had one man, and I have permission to use what he said to me. He said, because I found it so striking, I was inviting everybody to soften and open. And he said to put attention into my felt experience and soften my body. I have so many messages in there that say, you're being a wussy. That's not being a man. You have to override. And so in our culture, we have this model for all of us. It's a soldier training. Override. Don't pay attention to how you feel. Don't pay attention to your body. Don't pay attention to your health. Don't pay attention to the wobble. Function on top. Produce the Athena, the sun, the God, the sun god, the all functioning, strong, all of that. This is incredibly, incredibly hard on men. And it's deeply internalized. And I would say that more than a man-woman problem, we have a fear and hatred of yin problem. We have all internalized it, and we're acting it out on each other, and we're furious and we're heartbroken. So I don't know if I answered your question, but divine yin, just to see, people say things like, oh, she throws like a girl. When I watched my daughter growing, and I watched the beauty of some of her natural states, there was such a reverence in me, and there's such a feeling, yes, she loves like a girl. She bees like a girl. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing you can be in a young, imbalanced culture is a little girl. That's what everyone is. He started wailing like a little girl. Oh, you throw like a girl, et cetera, et cetera. And for little boys, it's like they want to be boys. They want to be good boys. They want to be loved boys, and they want to be loved by their fellows. And when they hear the way to be accepted and loved by your fellows or your father or whoever is to not be a girl, because a girl is a worse thing, yin, to not show any softness. And inside of softness is connectedness. Inside of softness is heart. Now, this doesn't mean I'm going on a roll. Is this okay?
Please, this is the best roll ever, Jeannie. Keep it coming. It's great.
And now I lost the roll. Yeah. There's that softening, that yin allows connectedness. It allows heart, but it is abandoned without yang. So this is not sort of the pussification of the world, although that's one of the steps we need. I'm saying, we all need to just soften into our hearts, okay? But what serves yin in human embodiment is healthy yang, is being able to protect oneself, is being able to use the voice and use the hand and have clarity and be grounded. And yin, it's like, you're not going to allow the pupil of your eye to open if there's a stick coming at it and you don't have the capacity to stop the stick. This is just speaking in terms of the creature of the body. Because in advanced stages, we can choose to allow harm for greater purpose. Jesus is a great model of that. So he's not leaving love, he's not leaving the field, he's not leaving his softness, and he's not protecting. He's allowing something. And sometimes in our lives, we may choose to override the body's protective mechanism, for example, to grab a child out from an oncoming car. This is the beauty of yang and the beauty of the place of where override is fine. It's like, no, don't sit on the sideline crying, get up and save the child. That's like, so beautiful. But we need yang as much as we need yin. But yang separated from the ground of yin looks like what we have now. Rigidness, closedness, leaping over. When a being's roots are dangling deep in yin, when we feel the ground, that when we feel a confidence to just be wide open, resting here, content to just simply be. We don't need to produce an identity. We don't need to get busy in order to feel like we're something. We just can feel our nothingness, and we're happily embodying that. When we have that ground mastered, or when it masters us is a better way of saying it, and when all of the movements that allow us to sink and soften open are reclaimed and the humiliation dusted off, then the yang that rises there is planted in being. It's planted in yin. It's planted in timelessness. It's the kind of movement that you see reflected in a lot of the ancient writings about, that kind of action leaves no footprint. Or skillful means rise from being able to draw on the entire library of openness, of beingness. And so the kind of action that naturally rises, just like in the rest of the world, things fruiting and, all of what's happening, dewdrops, filling, dropping. That's like a beautiful model of true yang. It fills from the ground and delivers its fruit. And because it's not skipping over anything or trying to compensate for something or trying to bolster itself up, it's naturally rising. It has the support of the holy. It has the support of the ground. It has the support of the cosmos. And movements like that don't take energy from us the way that conditioned compensatory movements take. It's just a natural flowering. Like people say, how did you just listen to people for 7 days, all day into the night? How do you do that? And for me, it's like, did I do something? Because there's such an abiding in being, and everything that moves is moving from that zero. There's not a sense that anything's being done. So I think I'll pause. I think I answered your question and then some.
Yes. That was a beautiful statement. And it's very emotionally evocative for me listening. In fact, more than I even expected it to be. It was almost as if while you were speaking, I got that like choke in my throat. It's like that feeling where I've had this before, like someone's like spit a dart and it hit me right here. And you can feel just the depths and the longevity of this pattern, quite profoundly.
I just have to say, to reclaim the ground, to reclaim the movements of yin is not a small thing. We are undoing and shedding centuries of conditioning. And included in those centuries of conditioning are fears that we will be killed if we soften open. Yeah, and so this is burned. And it's amazing how we all have our favorite one. Some people will say burned, and some people will say obliterated, and some people will say stoned. Gee, I wonder where that all comes from. And so we have in our flesh, and it is literally in our flesh, this sense that if we soften and be bunnies, that something awful will happen to us. And so this is not, and my work as a whole, it's been a little funny because at the end of an event, people want to tell people about it, and there's no way to describe it because it's all happening below the mind. Right. The essence of it is in energetic movements that are so off our map. We don't know how to speak about it. And yet people have these big grins on their faces and their beings have opened. It's like, what just happened? And so to convey this work, I do from some of my words and my energy, when people see the incredible tenderness and the reverence and they see the yang and the protection that is integrated in this and then in the work, it's like, oh, that, but they don't know how to say it. And so I just want to say this unfolding and embodiment of these things, because we're really talking about embodiment. There's, many of us have had the experience of what we truly are. And now let's get up off our cushion and live it. This is where embodiment happens. And because the way that I felt open was so inextricably woven into the flesh of my body. I don't teach, oftentimes you'll hear this sort of like awakening, then embodiment, as though it's like a one wave and then the second wave. And for me, the experience was together. There was a softening open, no leaving the body, light penetrating flesh, all one unfolding, and no sense of destination out there called awakening, but a deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper sinking into here now as I am, the conditioned sort of scaffolding, crumbling, sinking, opening, like that. And then an exploration of, okay, that's happening and I can rest in being. And now how does that give birth to action in the world? Which is, I think, one of the biggest questions that comes into satsang is, how do I live this? But that evoking, like Vanessa, if you were in an event with me right now, I would invite you to stop and sink, because one of the things that happens in a yang imbalanced culture is that we worship the objects and not the ishness, not the context, not the atmosphere, not the things that are unseen, but the things we can produce. So as long as we are speaking words, we are someone and we have something to offer. Mm-hmm. But the minute that our throat clutches and we have no words and we fall into this wide open place, well, let's move on from you, Missy, because obviously like you're having a problem, right? But when we factor yin and we say, oh, my Lord, the birth of the heart is breaching. Is that how you say with the whales? The heart is emerging. Stop the traffic. Behold, I'm gonna get touched now because there's such great love here for this, and it's so disowned. Like, stop the presses, stop the traffic. Let the bunny cross the road. Let the softness birth and spill into the room. And when people are in my events and I say, stay right there, you don't need to speak in order to have the mic. You are way more than your words. You are an atmosphere. You are a whole world. And then they get to hang in there. And then up comes, you better get the hell out of there, which is a conditioned thing that rises every time. People have anywhere from 2 to 7 minutes before they notice they've blown past their experience of how much attention someone will have for them if they're not producing anything. And then they say, oh, I'm taking up too much time. And I say, now we're really getting started. And just breathe and open and soften and sink. And it's just so beautiful, just that, to be allowed and protected, the space slowed down for the dawning of being, wordless being. So I'm not going to do anything with you now on our, on your show, like have you on the floor wailing about your witch burning or anything. But
although I do.
Yeah,
I'm totally game.
Right.
Yeah,
we could pause.
Brooke and I were speaking before as we were tuning in, getting ready to speak with you, and we don't prepare much to speak with you. You know that, Jeannie. But we did say for ourselves that to reclaim sovereignty and healthy yin and healthy yang and the bunniness and the creatureness is in a way to reclaim feeling safe with existing.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm glad you bring in conditioning and how deep this can be and how actually in the body this can be, and also how profound it can be, how unsafe it can feel to just simply exist.
Absolutely.
And part of the cultural dilemma, as you're pointing to, is we make healing seem easy, as if this recovery process.
So singing my song.
I know.
Put a quarter in, get full realization out. And if you're not, what the hell's wrong with you, idiot? Right?
And doesn't it feel good? And isn't it just blissful all the time? And you're manifesting all your dreams?
Let's just, between us three, smash that to smithereens, because that is just another form of the yang imbalance that says if you are not, okay, I'm sorry, fully erect, fully awake, fully functioning, fully perfect, then what the hell's wrong with you? And then the vitriol that comes, you know what I mean, that comes at beings who show, or even in the form of benevolent advising. Like, you're going to show a little vulnerability, you're going to show a little openness, I'm going to aggressively help you now, which is just another way to stick a finger into an open eye. It's like, no, when something like that dawns, shh. And everybody be with their discomfort, the discomfort that results in that aggressive helping or that shaming or whatever. We are completely tweaked as a culture by anything that pauses and opens and shows softness or vulnerability. We think, what's wrong with you? I'm going to help you get to manhood. You know, and manhood's a beautiful thing. But, you know, and I speak of it sort of because it's really tricky to walk in here without shaming anything or anyone. And it's very easy for everybody to feel shamed the minute we talk about these energies. They're all holy. We're all flubbering around. Women are in no better shape than the men. The men are in no better shape than the women. We are all struggling in this area in some very similar ways and some different ways because of our conditioning. But when we value this, and we scorn this. And I just want to say about that safety thing, this is so huge. And it's not a mistake that we are dealing with women's issues, we're dealing with men's issues, and we're dealing with trauma right now. Because this is the core of it. And my sense is that most men are deeply traumatized. They are in frozen states a lot. They're shoving that stuff out of their you know, growing up a boy, it's very hard to not have an experience of being physically overpowered and brutalized or being threatened with that. And then we women, we can see that all over the national stage right now. So many women triggered by this thing that just happened. And we must include trauma resolution and in our approach to all these things. I mean, there are some teachers who are weaving trauma resolution right in with their teaching right now. And I've been studying it for about 3 years after a couple of my students called attention to their learning. And so now it's woven into my guided meditations, and it's woven into how I approach people and how I hold people. And this is work. I'm not specializing in trauma resolution. I'm just trauma aware. And this work is just really so important because, as you said, to start to experience how safe we actually often are. We actually often are quite safe. But because of the ways that we've been brutalized or traumatized or had the Bee Jesus scared out of us, as they say, I lost that one. I got sort of enamored of the Bee Jesus thing. Jesus came in, and I was like, oh, you know, for a second. the metaphor of that. We've had ourselves disconnected from the glorious, benevolent present. That most of our present moments are actually, even when someone's yelling at us, most of our moments are actually physically safe, but we can't feel that because of what we carry. And bringing someone in a womb space down into the ground of being and letting them notice no harm and letting them notice breath and letting them notice ground and letting them notice there's plenty of time and letting them notice that no one is going to interrupt their process, jump in with advice, or talk to them over lunch about it, allows a being to soften open. We're not stupid. Our systems are so smart and will, the minute we get a womb space, resume the learning and resume the metabolizing the fear, finding ground, finding breath, shaking off whatever happened to us. And I feel like that's the work right now. It's bringing light down into flesh, or I mean, not that the light is just right here. It's like all around us, and through us and everything else. But when our flesh is like this, we're basically, talk about separation. We're just basically saying, everything that I am, stay out. I'm a nut in a hard case. And we can't even allow the nourishment of spiritual energy or ground or in for healing. And so you're so right. It's like being terrified of existing. We must experience protection. And if we bypass by saying, dude, you should be able to look, you don't need any protection. That's like self-thing and, like all that kind of thing. And just be wide open here. Why can't you be wide open? It's like, again, an ignorance about how flesh has such power over our capacity to allow our instrument to open.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And just having conversations like this one, like I'm just feeling it's so not a part of our culture. It's so a foreign planet that all of our solutions to what we're struggling with, being traumatized, being re-traumatized, watching all of the, major players who are powerful in the world be these really ungrounded, aggressive yang types. The only thing we can ever reach for as a balm or to feel like we're participating in our human lives or in the world is just it's just yang by a different name, because anyone who undertakes like being deconstructed, and I think at least for the three of us, but I think for a lot of people who have these conversations, at some point it's just not your choice. It's like
right.
Deconstruction time, and it just that's what's up. But the whole cultural frame doesn't even allow for that to be entertained as a viable process for, like you were saying, grounded yang, seeing genuine change, because for me, like in the past week, I went back to this old place of hopelessness and despair and not wanting to live. And where's the exit door? And none of this, fuck this. I'm this whole species. I just want out.
Yeah.
And then I noticed then from that place, it's like, no, okay, like I can armor up and what's my job and what can I do and how do I fix it? And like that's born out of the roots of despair and hopelessness and wanting to just get out of here.
Yeah.
And it always just comes back around to like this shedding again. If I'm pressurized in that way, it's because there's something that needs to shed. And my experience for myself and the way that I get to meet the world as I get deconstructed these last couple of years is that when I can be genuinely open, which is not all the time, that I do meet the world very differently. And we just don't have any reverence for what true open-heartedness is and how powerful it is. Because if you can really bring your heart to the world, no fear. And you can do real work in the world.
Yeah, I'm writing a little note because I have a Etch-a-Sketch for a brain, and I really love what you just said. And there's two pieces I want to add. Mm-hmm. One is that movement of despair and hopelessness, and I want to die. Yeah. I just want to repaint that as a call to yin. Mm-hmm. That is a call to the compost heap. That is a call to sink and die and rot and be held in the arms of darkness. Mm-hmm. And I just want to invite you and anyone who's listening to me, this doesn't work if you have severe trauma because it can be overwhelming. And so I have to add that in. But to allow yourself to lay on the floor and die of hopelessness, die of despair, sink into the dark, rot into the ground, let yourself be refuel, kind of like destructed, just like rotting plant matter. Let yourself be, just breathing and sinking and breathing and sinking. Maybe you cry, whatever, sinking. And then the organic process will reconstitute you and you will feel refreshed by your trip to the womb. When we get anywhere near despair, hopelessness, want to die, we do it to each other. We do it to ourselves. Like, get out of there, and then our zoop is just hollow. It's shallow. It's wimpy. It's made of whatever energy we can kind of get it up for. But meanwhile, there is an unmet process, an unfinished process of rotting. Every time we rot fully, just like our garden, we rot fully, all those nutrients return to the soil. And the seed and the sprout that comes from that is full. When we don't throw our vegetable matter back in our garden and we keep trying to suck nutrients out of the ground as it, what our plants get spindly. Their green is not as vibrant. Their fruit is not as delicious. Same with us. And so a lot of the doors to yin have bad names on them, like despair and hopelessness. Stay out of there. Mm-hmm. I say, no, let's go right in there. Yeah. And I'll watch the door. And as you rot and bring up what lives there, every time you bring up something and it's blessed, you sink a little deeper and you sink a little deeper. And that is absolutely necessary. The other piece I want to say about open-heartedness is true and rooted open-heartedness, of the models, Martin Luther King, I don't know because I wasn't with these people, Mother Teresa, and sometimes in a movie, we'll see a king or a queen or a knight or someone who has that integration. And we see that we're like food. It's like this beautiful marriage of softness, compassion, and heart with a sturdy sovereignty, as you said earlier, Vanessa. And I'd love to talk about that because it's a huge thing in my work. But the open-heartedness is the fruit of the full integration of yin and yang. So it's not, we can feel like, oh, I have this open-heartedness, but I can't leave my house and still expect to be that open. That is a product of, it's almost like the yin is crowning, but the yang is behind. And so as we work with the yang stuff, the safety stuff, and I work with Aikido sword as the model of yang, which is just a beautiful practice. We're not like whacking each other so much, as although sometimes we do, as the feeling of what it's like to take a stand. And the sword as a model of clarity, that those integrating, we can see it's like the product of that is a deeply mature human being. But again, it's not a put a quarter in, get enlightenment out. It's a deep, as all of us are crawling along the ground of this work, we know it's like there's big stuff happening in there. There's a lot just letting yourself be and rest soft. And then there's a whole lot in saying no. Just saying no. Mm-hmm. Because our whole culture is completely tweaked by yang, because we've been so harmed by yang. If any of us kind of starts to grow that capacity, we trigger the people around us. What gives you the right to have any kind of So I wanted to just speak to those two pieces of despair and open-heartedness. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I just want to so second that this paradigm is right now off the map. It's underground. And there are very few beings who actually walk with this integration. It is incredibly rare to see it in anybody. Mm. And it is, to me, the hope of our species, and the possibility of being a full and true human being, that we know what we are, who we are, and that we allow that embodiment of the capacity to be open and soft and the clarity and the movement to integrate so that we can move here as expressions of that depth, which always creates healing, harmony. It's just, it ripples out all around us when we have the capacity to take a stand from one of those places. But to take a stand means staring down everything that ever obliterated us. I saw a little girl once. I was many, many years ago working as an aide to this little boy because he was emotionally disturbed, and his brother was in the special class, and they would like bing bong off each other. So I had to kind of, stay with him in his classes and stuff. And I once watched in the line a little girl behind him, and she somehow bumped him. And he turned around and he said, "Back off." And she just blazed in her face and said, "Make me." And it was this glorious, unharmed female fierceness. And I felt in my body, I wanted to at first I felt completely moved. It was so beautiful. And then I wanted to dive in front of her and protect her for her entire life so that thing didn't get crushed the way it got crushed here. And I had to work my way back to it,
And it's so scary as a woman sometimes. I mean, growing up in New York City, and I think I was actually a pretty brazen person from very early on. Let's say someone catcalled you, and your intuition was to respond in defense, but immediately next to it was the fear, what could happen to me? And I just think something that comes up in your atmosphere, Jeannie, that is so important to bring into the conversation is tenderness. Because I imagine this exploration you were talking about with Brooke, let's say I was to lay on my floor and let despair take me. But let's say I'm unfamiliar with tenderness with myself. Then the world of concept comes in and I say, "What's the matter with you that you're despairing? Oh, you're all alone again, right?" Yeah. Or let's say I want to look at the ways in which this conditioning has affected my life. And if I was to go back and say in my 30s, I had a man kiss me and I couldn't say no, even though I didn't want to. Right. And I was to say, even in my 30s.
Yes.
Right. And I was to look at that. If I haven't engendered a relationship with tenderness and compassion, it can become very harsh terrain, and we can turn away from these important bits of our own existence and our own healing process. And so I thought, well, how do people engender that? Do they need to, just in talking to you about it, does it help to be in the space of someone else who has it? Like, where do you think we begin when we're very raw and we're very inflamed right now? And we don't even know which way is left or right. Where do we begin?
Boy, I just have so much to say in response to what you just said. Oh my gosh. Everywhere that you were speaking, in here up pops yin, 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 and out. So I want to just describe them. So in the context of a cat call, without yin and in our paradigm, we perceive ourselves as a small victim, and we perceive them as a big bad oppressor. Mm-hmm. And so what rises is fear and fury. And within the victimized paradigm, we can either get sassy and shout something back and be tough. And that's the model of power we have right now. Our model of power is actually baby yang. It's not integrated for women. And I have a lot to say about that too. But true power, first of all, assesses, and let's say, it's tricky because we have so much terror in our bodies. It's hard to assess anything. But if we were to take someone who had addressed the trauma in their body, who was just relaxedly on the street and got a cat call, the model of true power that very few of us can even remotely touch right now looks like, "Hey, friend, glad you appreciate me. And, I would love to tell you something about where I'm sitting right now." You know what I mean? It's like, this is one of the telltale signs of true power, is that there's no oppressor, there's no victim, and there's a hand that goes, "Hey, friend." Now the hand may say, "Hey, friend, back off," or the hand may say, "Hey, friend, like, what's going on over," since we are fellow human beings, since you have a heart in that body somewhere, since you probably have a mother or a sister, what's the struggle over there that makes you act in such a funny way, and there's a whole deconstruction and understanding, first of all, of men's conditioning and what's actually happening in a man in there. And then there's a whole bunch of dynamics in our conditioning and what's actually happening there and what's actually skillful here. So there's just a lot in there. And I want to say one of the things also missing when we think about appropriate responses are the yin methods, which are incredibly valuable, and animals know these, of hiding and running, right? Hiding and running are two really smart things to do in the animal world when you're truly threatened. But our model is, no, we have to roar, right? When you can actually grant the animal of your body the right to hide or run, you have much more of a capacity to be able to tell when to stay. And some of these things aren't mental. We have to actually, I remember one woman, talking about having a certain conversation with her sweetie. And she said, I just feel like running whenever I think about it. So I let her just run like 8 times out of the room. She came back in and she started to talk to me, and then she just took off and ran. It was like there was something in the body then that was integrated from reclaiming that yin capacity, not just to stand or fight or state, but actually to run and to hide. And let me see. This is where in this integration, all oppressors disappear. It's you and me. And you may have a big axe and you may be completely delirious, but you are my fellow human being with an axe, deeply delirious. And that requires us moving through our stuff so much that there isn't a projection of I'm small and you're big, and a realistic assessment. It's been amazing to me in my later years how many scenarios as a young woman, how I responded to them and how I respond to them now. And I have taken men in mid-attack blame mode all the way down to the floor crying when I don't split off and say, hey, friend, what's hurting over there? But that comes from a lot of years of reclaiming my sense of safety in the world. So that's really key. And then, yeah, that's enough there. I think what happens is like I sprout 8 paths out my head. I can't, since I don't have 8 mouths, I have to go down one and then the other ones disappear.
We can relate. Yes. We get into this with every episode we record for sure.
I bet. Yeah.
To go a little bit more deeply into what you were just saying for people who are listening.
I just remembered the other piece.
Oh, good. Yes.
Do you mind if I speak it?
Oh, I would really love that.
Because this was a big piece that you were speaking to, Vanessa, which is mercy. And we will often approach our healing with the same mistreatment that we got in our hurting and be rough with ourselves. I think in order to start to embody mercy, I do think it helps to be in the company of someone who is offering you mercy where you've never had mercy, and showing you and holding space for you to actually feel what it's like. Mercy, the best way to describe it, is a sword coming down, and there's a sense of recognition of what's happening. The sword is coming down toward innocent flesh, and mercy says, stop, soften, that's flesh. And so it requires, in a way, us to start to recognize our softness, the places where we got hurt weren't our fault, and to actually start to really embody the deliciousness of, it's like giving ourselves a break, of softening there. But I do think that modeling really helps. And it helps not just in our surface, but when we're talking about something and we're descending, we're going to a specific address. To then have mercy applied there is really different than either reading about it in a book or having me talk about it right now. Like if you started to unfold to the place where the kind of road rashed young one lives, then to feel the mercy. It's like, oh my God, I had no idea I was even roughing myself up in there. I had no idea. This is not what I'm for. I'm not for roughing up. I'm for touching tenderly. And in those places, we just don't, it's not even something that we ever conceived of because we never had it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Brooke, for letting me just
That's so
stick
beautiful.
that piece
I'm
in
so
there.
glad it came forward. And it actually gets to some of what I wanted to say, but what comes up, it's so ludicrous to say, but it's what comes up for me and what comes up in a young culture, which is, and so I'll ask it because I'm sure it's on people's minds, and I think a lot of good will come out of it. Being conditioned in young culture, what comes up is something like, give me proof or give me a guarantee that if I'm willing to take this journey, that if I'm willing to let myself decompose, that it'll be like worth it, are kind of the words. And I think that just is in all of us because of culture, like prove it that it's worth it, prove it that it's fruitful.
Right. I don't want to walk down this dark road if I'm going to get lost in an eddy of doom.
And pain, right? Because
it's certainly not, sometimes. There's no guarantee that it's fast. Well, there's no guarantee, like, yeah.
Well, number one, and this is, I think, one of the, it's like, I'm kind of a total dumb bunny around like putting the word out about my events and stuff. I'm just like, I'm an idiot in that area. I do little things, but one of the biggest sort of testimonials for what I'm teaching is actually what I embody. And when people see somebody attack me, right? And they see that there's no interruption in the force and there's no interruption in hey friend, and watch that be brought down to the ground to harmony and togetherness. Holy crap. To watch a being move through challenging circumstances without dividing. And then, I sometimes say, when I sit down, I say, if I'm talking to people who are experiencing deconstruction, I'll say, here's the proof. Go ahead. And this is why so many people going through deconstruction in the dark night contact me, because they read an account of what I experienced and they say, oh my God, that's where I am. And my experience was absolutely that I would never emerge. My life was over. I was probably mentally ill, years of darkness. And then they see me now with like light beams shooting out my eyes and like wanting to love up every like crawling thing that exists, It's like, oh, but more than that, I feel like we are having hostile takeovers by the dark, right and left, all around us. And it is the people who cannot help but have dark visit them, the people who are already being deconstructed, for whom this message is such a balm. If you're having a light, bright experience and you had your awakening experience and you have your awake career and you're just like careening around like the internet shining, like go for it, like have that, yay, and who knows, like bow to that. So for me, there's no need to sell the dark path. There's no need to sell deconstruction, because once you start to experience deconstruction, because you have invoked the holy, good luck looking on the bright side.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, because you are a caterpillar who has half built your cocoon. You're trying to get into the cocoon. Your body's already liquefying and the culture's saying, rip that cocoon off and fly, little bugger. And then you meet someone that says, get in your cocoon. You're rotting and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Let's seal that thing up and let you liquefy. No problem. I've got the door. You go, oh, because there is nowhere that attempts to enter false yang feel more painful and exhausting than when you are being drawn down by yin. It's like every move to try to get it up is just where when you were younger, you could just get it up and you could keep it up, and I'm sorry about any ways that I'm being disrespectful. I just can totally imagine like a dude doing a presentation and saying like, and then you're spread like this. And I'm saying it's like, I know that I'm walking a tricky line. I just want to bow to the men and the beauty of their genitals so that nobody, I'll be the first to line up behind that, like that devotion as well. I'm making fun of the movement in our culture that says override it, shove it down. It's a natural process. And it's a beautiful process because it is a rotor-rooter process. You cannot just wake up in your head and have your heart closed when you get the rotor-rooter process. It goes into every little pocket and brooms out division. And so it's impossible to not take on the full embodiment because for some of us, our faces are just forced there. There's something passionate in our system that says, I will uncover every rock where division lives and I will bring the light. And it's not like even it just happens, bring the light of non-division there. So I say, no need to, honestly, no need to market the darkness because look all around you, the darkness is coming for us. It is coming for us. And we have an opportunity to open and embrace it and go through collectively our descent and watch, it's just beauty. It's beauty to watch the holy beam light in its rebirth. That's what creates faith, deep knowing. It's not like book knowing. It's like, yes, I have been to the bottom of hell, and guess what? The holy lives there too. Mm-hmm. And we're being asked for this level, the level of love that is a product of having been forced to kiss your inner lepers, the level of love and non-division that moves from there. That's power. And that's what our earth needs right now. And so nobody has to walk down this path, and everybody has to try out the yang solution again and again and again and again till you fall down sick. And if it works for you, great. As far as I know, there are beings who just, wake up with a beam of light and there's just nothing to face. I mean, I've heard this is possible, but then I hear about Eckhart sitting on a bench for 7 years and I hear about Adya squirming around in his bed when he can't go biking because he's ill. And I just have a sense that if we want to fully embody light, the light has to meet and bless everything we call dark. None of it's dark. It's just been banished. That's all. It just doesn't know it's the light. Exactly.
This is the moment, usually we're wrapping it up, but I feel we would be remiss if you have time, Jeannie, not to talk about the collective level, because it's, on the one hand, we can all imagine that personal descent. Okay, I'm going to lay on my floor. I'm going to give myself space. I've even spoken to some clients this week who are having a really hard time with what's rising in the US and they needed rest. And I say, it's okay. That's why we do this as a collective. Some people have to step back while others step forward.
Beautiful.
That's okay, right? But when we look at it on the collective level, that's often where the panic arises because there are very real consequences to the choices that are happening and the events that are unfolding. And then that panic makes us feel we have to move into that certain kind of yang, which is all we're familiar with. So if we take it out of the individual level and we look at it on the collective level, how do you imagine this sovereignty or this embodying of yin coming into our culture?
Yeah. Well, let me just speak to something that is, again, very yin, because we focus on the objects and we focus on the events and we want to affect the objects and we want to affect the events. But we often overlook the ground out of which the events are springing. And yes, we are all that ground. And we are all spilling, contributing to the flavor of that ground, the clarity or the dysfunction of that ground in every moment. So I don't know I don't think we can measure it, but when the ground of something shifts, and I've seen this happen just interpersonally, when the ground of division shifts into ground of embracing, miracles happen. Mm-hmm. Attackers drop their swords, enemies take hands. I mean, I've just seen it again and again and again and again. And so we would be remiss, as you said, I like your word remiss, to only focus on what do we do in the world. So we get to vote, we get to speak, we get to march, we get to do lots of things. One of the things that I would super encourage is to pull away this sense of against, because the hearts of all people are at stake. You know, the pocketbooks of some people and the poorness of other people, true. But on the level of humanity, we are all just a bunch of sinners, so to speak. And we are all ailing. We are sick. Our hearts are sick from that. Many beings have that covered over, etc. But the power of 1, 2, 5, 20 human beings reclaiming the capacity to rest in a clear ground and just walk across the street in that energy has a huge impact. But we can't just say, especially as white people, we can't just say, let's just meditate our way to nirvana and groovy, the things will change. We get to look around us and we get to act as justly and clearly and connectedly as we can in every direction. And I would also say one of the things that we can do is refuse to spill division and hate into the commons in our conversation, in our relationships, in our writing, in our Facebook posts, in our meme sharing. Refuse to share anything that makes anybody a bad guy. We are family. Some of the people in our family are ailing enough to be hurting other people in our family. But to deride and poke and make fun of and just contributes to the ground out of which the whole thing is springing. So that's some. I mean, I'm going to vote. I'm making sure my daughter, who's in Ohio, is, supporting her to vote. And voting, it's a good thing. It's like a beautiful expression of, this is what I see. Like, here are the beings that I see are most righteous, and at the same time, how are we behaving, for example, with the men in our lives? How are we behaving with the women in our lives? How are we stepping out of non-division? Just pausing before we take a sword, just pausing and breathing and doing our bit of digestion, our bit of composting, instead of just more of the same and more of the same and more of the same. And I really think, especially people who carry trauma, women who carry trauma, around sexual abuse and being overpowered, physical abuse, that we recognize that when we plug into the national stage and get completely transfixed there, getting freaked out, getting panicked, running around doing things, that we are not actually helping, and that much less of that and much more noticing the trees, noticing the ground, restoring the state in our bodies out of which kindness issues forth is much more powerful than transfixedly looping in our trauma. Commit to seeing that you carry and are a transmitter, we all are, of the confusion, and do everything that you can personally to eradicate and heal the confusion and the pain that you carry is another piece. Holding space for each other, just to talk about what it's like, but in that space it's like if we all need to do, it's like, what was that Greek play where the women all get drunk and end up killing one of the beloved men because they're so drunk on their fury. That play, you could just have that play right now. And I saw it performed a couple of decades ago. It was just breathtaking how completely apropos it is now. And it was written in who knows what AD. And where was I going with that? We need places that are ritual, that are sessional, that are held space where we can, if we need to, decapitate a man and not decapitate the men or castrate the men in our lives. We need to recognize that those energies are energies that need to be healed. They may need to be expressed because we have so much fury. We need to learn to say no. We need to learn to say back off. But we are not gaining anything by being sassy girl attackers. That is not power. It's not the way to the solution to get more and more sassy. It's definitely necessary that we allow our rage to instantiate a level of strength in us. Rage is baby warrior being born. It's not full-on warrior. Full-on samurai warrior never moves from rage, moves from love. And the lessons of Aikido are beautiful in this regard because the man who founded it was absolutely rooted in this non-division. So it's recognizing that we have an impact on the commons. And no matter how mad we are, and no matter how righteously mad we are, that needs to be bracketed in a sessional space and not projected out and taken out on the men who are actually trying. And I have, I can speak this way because I've held space for men. I did a men's retreat last year. It was beautiful. 15 guys in the redwoods, and I taught them some sword, and, it was just lovely. The heart of a man, we settle for power over when we are denied love. Power over is the next best thing. If I can't be open and connected and feel the holy moving through my body, sure, I'll buy a bunch of real estate and tell all you stupid people what to do. Ha, 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 right? But this is not the preference of the heart. And the men who are caught in that need to be shown the heart. But talk about vulnerable. If we think that our path is messy, try being a dude who needs to soften. Amid the entire culture saying, what the hell is wrong with you, you idiot? You guys are like this. You're animals. You're untrustworthy. You're bad. And the guys are terrified of our fury. They are absolutely terrified, shut up like clams around us. The guys don't feel safe around us. I don't know who feels more safe for guys. It is tough as a man to find a space where you can take your armor off and not get shit slung at you from somebody. And so that deep recognition is something at first we just have to remind ourselves of. And it's a sign of maturing that we can take what's sessional in us and give it a place to actually heal rather than act it out in the world on other beings, no matter how they're performing. It doesn't help. Someone who's moving out of because they have been conditioned in this culture to add more on them does not contribute to them shifting at all. Love does it, but not love without a sword. It's like this firmness, this clarity that is not okay here. And now let me hold you. And nobody's job. We don't have to go hold the men. We have a lot of healing to do. They have a lot of healing to do. Each of us gets to find the places where we can do that. So that was kind of a long answer.
Oh, and I have so many more things I want to say.
I could talk to you for 8 hours easily.
Oh, this is just such good stuff. And it just, the roads point everywhere when we start talking in here.
Yeah. And just that sense of what you're saying, this non-division, which I certainly agree with. I think Brooke does as well. You look at teachers like the Dalai Lama, and that's surely been the path he's chosen. It's been the wisdom he's held. And even you look at the healing Nelson Mandela did in his country, which is profoundly inspiring and moving to me. But even culturally, we're never thought to think beyond our life. We're never thought to think beyond this one.
Yeah.
And we're coming to that. I feel very inspired by a lot of the energy rising in the collective, because look how we're fumbling around trying to come to it's not just about me.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think that it's a certain kind of development or maturity where we can look around us and say, how is my neighbor doing? Because we are so transfixed by our own owies, and rightfully so, they hurt. To me, learning about the conditioning of other groups is super important and super enlightening to read. Now, it's tricky to find men's work that doesn't have some vitriol toward women that will piss us off, because, they're pissed. and they have some real reasons to be pissed. But there is some work out there that doesn't demonize women, that's talking about what is it like to be a man. Absolutely. White Privilege Conference, which I think is happening in Iowa in March this next year. And I attended that this past year. Learn about what's happening with other people. And then we start to see, hey, guess what? The enemy is not the other guy. And in fact, us white middle class people who have money for therapy, we can get completely sidelined in this me, glorious me thing.
Well, this is going to be fun to be speaking with you at Sand very soon.
I know.
That will be in some way, it's a little dessert for us after this, because we feel like we can dive in more and more and more. I'm looking to have a bunch of days with you and moderate the panel with you.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
I have a little thing that I prepared for your viewers. If you want me to tell you about it, I'm not sure. I think I sent you the URL for it, but I am synchronistically doing a 3-call series on yin for women that starts October. I'm not sure, late October. 3 calls online, and I just made a little. Actually, my techie person Tate made a little page so that you can see kind of that. And then I also, there's this beautiful musician named Angelica. And when she was at one of my retreats, she said, I have to put my music to some of your yin meditations, please. And so we collaborated, and she took some of my yin meditations and wove her yin music through them. So on this page, that is there also. And then if people want to find out more or be plugged into this work, there's a little sign up, a little email sign up on the page. And this is the work of my heart. I have so many directions in me, from dark night to men's to women's to yin to embodied spirituality. It's like, I need some help. But this, I'm about to go up to Ridgeway, Colorado and do a workshop for women called Yin Revolution. And my dream is that I get enough women charged for this, that sometime, maybe next year, we do a committed program where we have 3 retreats, we have online stuff, and we just really, because this is not an overnight thing, the full embodiment of this integration, even that program will just give a taste. I've spent my life on this, really, from the time I was old enough to know I was a girl. And so a lot of this, but anyway, the time is now. We need to dedicate ourselves to this and actually become, instead of hiding flowers or sassy whackers, queens, embodied love queens who are actually spilling this into the commons,
Amen.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes, please.
So the URL for this is my website, jeanniezandi.com/courses/yin.html. And I don't know if you guys probably have the capacity when you post this to
we'll
post
have
that
in the show notes for everyone listening. It'll be in the show notes for you if you click through.
And bless Tate's heart, Tate is right now putting the last touches on that page. So it should work if anybody goes to it right now, and we'll be refining it over the next hours.
Before we post it.
Sort of like living by the seat of your pants. This is what it looks like.
Yin at its fullest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yay. Oh, thank you so
We're
much
so
for what you
grateful.
guys do. Oh, yum. Just
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
We
just
love
want you guys
talking.
to know your voices and what you do is so important on this stage right now. It's just deeply important, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeannie.
And I know other people do too.
It's
That's an honor for us.
a great honor, and we for sure feel the same about you. We're thrilled that you exist and that you're doing this work and bringing this all forward in your very particular, delicious Jeannie way.
Exactly.
Here's to the yin revolution.
Yes.
Here's to the yin revolution.
Yes.
Woohoo.
Thank you so much. Again, huge gratitude to Jeannie Zandi for talking with us today. And thank you to all of you for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any and all the resources we mentioned, including Jeannie's course on embodying yin. I think it's called Yin Warrior Queens, but it's a 3-call course, so it can be done long distance. We're not getting any kickback for this. We just think that Jeannie is delicious and clear and a wonderful teacher. So we'll put that in the show notes, and we'll send it out in our weekly newsletter. But all that's going to be at blissandgrit.com. And you can chat us up and also support the show in a few different ways. So first, there's the easy peasy Instagram and Facebook, or you can become a supporting member at patreon.com/blissandgrit. That's a small monthly amount donated to keep the episodes rolling, but also to get some resources, including a private forum. Also, we both, Vanessa and I, work privately with clients all over the world thanks to magical internet. So we're helping people as they walk this path in their lives and figure out the discernment of like, how does this all land if we're getting out of the space of trying to think our way into new solutions. So information about that and how to find our private practices also linked on the Bliss and Grit website, or you can go to vanessascotto.com or brookthomas.me. We're so grateful to all of you for the reviews you've written, the membership support you've provided, and all of the notes you send. Thanks, and we'll be back next week.